Hey everyone, Jay, Kathy, Jim, thanks for coming in episode 3.
Hi,
Hey,
how's everybody doing?
thanks for having me.
Jake has been mentioned several times on the last 2 episodes. So Jim, do you want to explain how does Jake come into the picture? We're like circa 2007, I think.
Words do not describe the importance of Jake Kassen. I'm going to refer to Jake for the rest of the day as Captain Jake.
How did that start?
We were filming on a dock down in Boston Harbor, and this tugboat came up and honked, and they were, generally being abusive to Liz. It ruined the shoot. But just off camera was another boat, and on the boat, it had painted Capt'n, CAPT/N, Jake. And we turned the camera, and I said, Jake, we got to get this. We got to get Captain Jake. So, he goes over and waves a little bit. I said, no, you got to ham it up. So he does, 2 or 3 of these. That's where that came from. And that was back in probably 2010. The story of Jake, the importance of Jake, is essentially we would not have ever produced any of the media that we have been producing now for, I think, almost 16 years if it weren't for Jake. Yeah. And it was
true.
One of those things that just sort of happened. We were filming a pilot for the cooking show early on. And a friend of mine, Darren Sarafian, he was a Hollywood director. At the time, he was directing episodes of House. I don't know if you remember that show.
House MD with Hugh Laurie.
Yeah. And so he came into town, and we had put an entire little crew together. And Jake was hired as a sort of a freelance cameraman. I didn't meet him at the time. And when he came in, he was doing some of the location shooting. And when they were done with that, and it took, I think, a couple of days during the weekend, then they were moving into that little studio that we had created to do some of the studio part of this pilot. And I was in the studio, and people were coming and going. I think I was probably on a ladder, and I was doing something. And Jake came in, and I recognized him as one of the cameramen. Hey, how you doing? We're talking. And my version of this, Jake, was you looked around and you were asking a couple of questions, and you said, you built all this? And I said, yeah, it's kind of like a copy of our kitchen at home. And this is for this, we're doing this cooking show here. And he said, who's your sponsor? And I said, we don't have a sponsor. And that was like a light bulb moment with Jake saying, who the hell are these people? They be doing this on their own.
Crazy enough to do without a sponsor.
Crazy enough. Right. We've been called crazy on a lot of levels, but this one here was a labor of love. But so Jake and I kind of bonded at that moment, and we got to know each other. But in that moment, I just thought he was a freelance cameraman. So he and there was this other cameraman, they filmed all the different sequences that we needed for this pilot that happened over that part of a week. And when all of that was done, again, we were talking, and I really knew nothing about television production. And I got to the point where I was asking questions, and Jake was answering the questions. So I was at a point where I was like, so what do you do? And that was the first time I learned that Jake worked at Boston University. And what's your title there, Jake, by the way? I know I call you the technical director, but what is your title? Manager of
technical operations. So pretty much everything in the college communication that is video related or audio related, and all the stuff that the studios are actually in the space as opposed to things that go out with the students. That's kind of my domain. Yeah, so building studios, doing all the broadcast engineering, that's always been my kind of my bread and butter.
So we've known each other for, I think, almost 16 years. We're talking about, this was probably 2009.
I got brought into the project. A friend, who's early on the show, asked me to come, and she really basically didn't describe a whole lot of what was needed. And I was like, well, sure, I'll help out, shoot a little bit. And there's a bunch of other people involved that she was friends with. And I didn't really know what to think, to be honest. I've sort of figured, okay, it's a easy job,
Side
day or
work,
two of
right?
work, not a big deal. And, so I did that, and I like working with her. And I even remember that it was actually a little bit, I won't say awkward, but it was confusing because we were getting close to the point in which the video was going to be shown to you, and I only knew you as a client. So there's that whole, the client is the important person, so that's the one you want to impress.
Who didn't know what the hell he was doing.
Yeah, but I mean, you always want to do right by the people who are putting together things, one way or the other. And I definitely remember there being a meeting with a bunch of people, because I think they had me doing a bit of editing on that. My scope kind of grew, and it was really informal. And I remember there being a night, I think it was probably even before you saw that, before it was screened. And I was trying to wrangle everyone together. I'm like, hey, I need some more feedback here. I'm still not sure exactly what this thing is, what you're trying to do.
No script. There was no script.
Going for, yeah, it was really, it's like, all right, we got a lot of footage here. We can go a lot of different ways, but I'm not the one who created this, so tell me what you want. And it was kind of like crickets, because I think the people that I was working with, they were mostly on camera people, and they weren't producers, so they didn't have the whole. Right. And they weren't really thinking about the structure of it all. They were just thinking about how individual shots looked. I don't think they were really thinking of how it all came together. And,
how I look on camera, right? How do I look?
Yeah,
on camera?
which is common. And I remember bringing it in, and and it was a really rough cut of this opening. The first time I'd been to that location, and I was thinking like, well, whatever. I'm never being hired back on this group. I'm like they're gonna look at this and be like, what is this? And I would legitimately say, well, I was doing what I was told, which wasn't a whole lot. And I think anyone who's done freelance in these situations would understand. But, you were happy and I was happy. And that when I saw the location, and that's when I was like, wow, this is really impressive. This is not what I was expecting. It was like, okay, I knew it was a restaurant, but I wasn't thinking that there was going to be,
a built-out
studio in this. Yes, that was sort of the beginning. And I don't know if you, and the thing is, so then that was sort of screened, and I gave the video, and then that was sort of it. I didn't have a whole lot of feedback after that, and I wasn't really involved for a little while. I think I was brought back on because you were using Final Cut, and I got a call, and I was like, hey, could I give some help with just how to do editing, how to get things sort of structured. Right? It wasn't for, video runs. It wasn't for photography. It was just like, to help us out. And I was like, okay, yeah, sure. I do this a lot. And then, and that's when I started working with you more. Right. And some of the original people, they sort of, first we were all there as a group, and then, one by one, they sort of stepped out, and I just started working with you directly. I was just much more, because you were someone who, even if you didn't have producing training, you were thinking like a producer. And from my point of view, that's what I needed. I needed someone who sort of had this vision, who understood how all the pieces came together. And I was absolutely very surprised. I sort of figured, well, you must have some connections to the industry, and you're just being, coy about it, or you don't want to get into it, and that's fine. But it was great working with you. And I'm so, like I said, I was just so happy that there was someone who really was approaching this from the point of view as a producer, and not as an owner, and not as talent, but someone who really actually understood the producing part of it, which is oftentimes the hardest thing to, for people to get their head around.
One time when I was explaining what I wanted, and I was not quite getting my point across, and I was like, we really, if we keep doing this, Jake, we're going to have to get a producer. And you looked at me and you said, you're a better producer than most of the producers I've ever worked with in this industry. And I didn't really even know what a producer was supposed to do. So I was like, well, that's a great compliment. Thank you. And I think I even said, so what does a producer do? And you kind of walked me through, and you said, this is what a line producer does. This is what a producer does. This is what the director of photography does. This is what a director does. This is what the writer does. What the talent does. And you kind of frame the whole thing. And, that connected a lot of dots for me. Later on, you actually said, yeah, you're directing right now. And then when you were doing that, you were actually the writer. And then when you're doing that, you were the producer. And I was like, Jesus, but you were helping me with all of it. So you really needed credit for every single thing we were doing, because you were cameraman, you were, grip, you were best boy, you were director of photography, you were director, you were producer. So there were some shows later on, I don't know if you remember this, when we were doing the credits, and you would have credit for like 10 different things that you were doing.
I know.
But the gap between...
Didn't need.
Yeah, well, they're there. They're still on our website, as a matter of fact. On Rustic Kitchen YouTube website, you can go and see all of Jake's credits. But the gap, by the way, was when the shooting was done, this guy, Darren Serafian, really, really nice guy, helped us tremendously. He took all of this, and he was from LA, and he went back to LA. And eventually he said, can you come out here? I need you to sort of guide what we want to do here. So I fly out, and we meet at this post-production studio in Hollywood. And this is when I start to realize how big of a favor he was doing for us. So we went into a room. I met the person who was running this massive studio, and they have all these editing rooms. It's the first time I saw the Mac towers underneath each editing station. Each room was set up with some chairs, viewing screens, so that people could view and talk to the editor. Some of the rooms are bigger, some are smaller. And the corridors of this place were all lined with posters of every contemporary TV show and movies that you would recognize, from the industry. This was a legitimate big production house. And the woman who was running it was there, and Darren was there, and I was there. He introduces me as the client, and he says, look, we don't have a big budget on this. What we'd like to do is have so-and-so just sort of get this into a timeline for us. And then, we can take it from there. And, if we get to picture lock, we'll be happy. And, we'll do all the, polishing, color correcting, audio correcting, motion graphics somewhere else. She looked at him and she said, Darren, you send a lot of work our way. She said, this is obviously important to you. And he said, yeah, I think this guy here is doing something really special, and he's got something, and, this could turn out to be something really big. And she said, look, I'll just, I'll give you the suite, just pay whatever this editor's name was, pay him what my cost is on him, and don't worry about anything else. And when we're all done, we walk out of there, and Darren looks at me and he goes, you cannot believe what she just did. I said, sounds like she gave us a lot. He goes, I'm blown away. And for the next couple of days, I worked in this edit suite with Darren and this guy. We cut everything up and got it to pretty much picture lock, which became the pilot. And then he layered in that animated graphics. Remember the animated graphics that he had done? And then he had a song written.
We were using a KT Tunsil song.
What was her name, that song?
KT Tunsil.
Yeah, so we were using that song, Beautiful Girl. And Darren went to a guy named Sean Rory, and he and Sean created a version of that is really...
It was a husband and wife team. One of them was the singer. The wife was a singer, and he was like a guitarist. And on the back of an envelope, or back of like a napkin, Darren wrote some lyrics, and they went into a studio and laid down some stingers and a nice 3-minute track that we've now used for years. That's the track that when we heard at the Emmys, that's how we knew we won, because all of a sudden they're playing our theme song. We're looking around.
Which we use to this very day. We still use that.
The graphics package we got a lot of mileage out of, and that song we got a lot of mileage out of.
Well, Jake knows better than anyone, because we took that graphics package. Actually, just recently, Jake was back in it, and we cut it apart, and we've used it for a lot of different things. We've used it for openings for kitchen tips. We've used it for teasers. We've used it for commercials. It's sort of our style now. So it ties nicely with Rustic Kitchen. So all of that was happening in LA. We come back, we finish the pilot, and but we're continuing with shows. And I'm calling Jake saying, someone can do this? Or do you know someone can do that? And Jake would say, well, let me come by. Let me see if I can do it. Again, in my mind, I'm thinking this is a cameraman. It's funny when you meet someone and you sort of pigeonhole them, and that's all you think they're capable of. And to call Jake a cameraman is like calling I am Pei a drafts person. Well, yeah, he does that too, but he does all other things. And so Jake would come by at night, and we would work, and he downloaded Final Cut Pro for us on one of our computers, and we start working. We start doing our own post-production work. And Jake works up at BU, which I don't know, what, 15, 20 minutes up the road, you think, Jake?
Yeah. If
And he'd come
This is
down
the
on
last
his
time we
bike.
were ever a client, because then at that point, we became just our own in-house everything.
Jake would come down at night, and we would work from 5:30 or so, 6 o'clock, till around 9 o'clock or so. And then I would take Jake's bike, and for the longest time, he would take the wheel off the front, and we'd open my hatchback and put the seat down, throw the bike in the back, and then I would drive him. He lived north of Boston. I'd drive him home, and then I'd drive all the way through Boston to the South Shore. We were living down in Capt'n. And, he would do this sometimes 3 days a week, sometimes on a Saturday. And this went on for a long time.
Years.
Years, yeah.
To me, it seemed like no matter what we needed, whether it was editing, motion graphics, color correcting, audio, reshoots, Jake would just jump in.
A new studio.
Yeah. So, and along the way, he's educating me. I'm asking, how do I do this? How do I do that? And he would say, well, you got to buy some equipment. And what kind of equipment? He'd list it out. Then he'd say, let me price it out at B&H.
Introduces us to
because I have
B&H.
discount because he buys so much there. And then we would go to Kathy and say, can we spend some money? And we're going to do some new lighting here. Or we're going to put some shotgun mics in. Or we're going to do whatever.
Yeah, you introduced us to Ketra lights, to gobos, lav mics, shotgun mics, omnidirectional mics.
Yeah.
Mixers, switchers.
We go out to NAB, National Association of Broadcasters in Vegas. You show us all that.
Yep.
Black Magic. You were one of the first people to mention Black Magic, 15 probably years ago, before that became a household name. Yeah, I think Jim is probably, it has to be one of your best students. Has to have had an honorary BU degree at this point.
You are by far the most enjoyable person to work with. That's why I kept doing the production, because it's fun. It's fun. You're such a great person to work with.
Well,
and that's a rarity in this business. I think from a lot of people, you get a lot of friendships that are kind of lateral. So people who are on the engineering side are friends with other engineers. People who are shooters are friends with other shooters. And everyone kind of knows each other, but it's not, it's kind of rare that you really enjoy working with someone who's sort of, the client, so to speak. Some people are better than others. It kind of, hopefully you don't work with somebody you hate. You're going to be friends with them to an extent, but you were the one person who was just like, oh, this is so, it's such a breath of fresh air. Someone who knows what they want, who, really knowing what you want is probably the biggest part.
Yeah.
But also knowing the limitations of what can be done, being willing to fund it, not asking for things that were, ridiculous, but also always wanting to push things forward, really having an eye for how things looked. Like I said, it was a great project, is a great project to work on. And that's why I would keep coming. I'd sort of slog through the day and be like, finally, I'm going to get to some place. I'm going to get to work with someone who is just a joy to be with. And I gotta say, being able to get a good dinner every night, that was a pretty.
I forgot about that. We would walk out of Rustic Kitchen.
What was your go-to
take
dish?
home for
was it a
Emily?
pizza?
I love the
pizza.
pizzas.
Yeah,
Love the
but-
pizzas. Yeah,
but crispy.
Pizza.
He liked them crispy.
Yeah, and that was Liz's. Liz turned me onto that. I kind of switched throughout the years. I went through the arancini phase.
Yep.
A lot of arancini. And I
You must have
definitely got to the
1,000
point where I
Rustic
was
Kitchen bags at your house. You must have bags
I
stacked
know
up.
it.
Always
I think we
adding
still have
capers
bags
to
of
the
them.
salad.
And then there was a certain point where I was like, okay, you know what? I can't be eating like this every night. And I switched it over, and that's why I started like, I'm just gonna get salad.
I remember you did have these waves. You'd say I'm gaining a little bit of weight, and then,
Yeah,
of course, we're going to talk about Jake being a cyclist in a moment. But Jake being a cyclist, if he put on a couple of pounds from a rustic meal, he'd just take his bike on a weekend and go ride 600 miles.
Not exaggerating.
Whatever he packed on, he tightened the belt up again, and he was fine. It was amazing to watch that.
I remember asking, we were doing a new website a long time ago, and I think Google Analytics was relatively new, and I asked him, is there any reason not for me to install this on the back end? And your response was, Google Analytics is like butter in a rustic kitchen dish. It's in everything. So then I felt comfortable doing it.
I
Yeah,
mean,
by the
that
way,
is true.
something, one time, we need to do something, and Jake says, we're gonna have, you're gonna have to have code written for this. And I said, well, who do we call for that? And he goes, I write code.
You had a Raspberry Pi running something at one point that you had coded too.
Yep.
Some
Yep.
lighting
Yep.
system, right? You had put a Raspberry Pi up in the ceiling and was running something.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I take a very different approach than most of my colleagues, my counterparts. I mean, I'm really, really into how can we do this? How can we do this sort of on our own locally? Generally all these studios get built and there are a bunch of off-the-shelf products and you kind of tweak them and they're all really expensive and you sort of chain them together and that's what you have. You talk to any AV installer or anyone who designs the studio, and 9 times out of 10, that's just what it is. It's like, here, this is the standard way of doing it. You buy these 10 things and you hire, an integrator that's going to go and, chain them all up and then you're done. And then that person walks away. And then if you ever need a color change, you got to call them back and spend a lot of money.
That's how they get you
to have them. Yeah. And I've never liked that. So I've always been about, can we take the technology, and most of it's pretty easy to manipulate directly. And that's what I do a lot of. I mean, at this point, I shoot not a whole lot of video. It's mostly doing studio designs and that sort of integration of, let's talk directly to the device. Let's write our own drivers so we can do exactly what we want. We don't have to go through one of these big elaborate systems that's going to be really expensive and time consuming to set up and then ultimately not do what we want anyway.
How many studios do you think you've built?
A lot.
Yeah,
A
it's
lot.
double digits between in higher ed and with us.
Well, we did 4, but he's
You've
building
done radio
over-
stations. Yeah.
Yeah, I've done a bunch of radio stations, a bunch of AV types, sort of corporate stuff. I didn't do any cooking stuff before I met you, but it's a really fun thing to work on, and I've learned so much about that whole side of things.
Yeah.
I did that project that you helped me out with, or made the connections for Trimark, and that was a great project.
Yep.
Yeah,
Seaport,
working
right?
with them, and that was a case where it was great because I knew all the food. I knew what they were going to be looking for in terms of the food shots, in terms of working around kitchen equipment. There is different ways of working around an actual kitchen than you would in otherwise a clean studio, for lack of a better word. So you've taught me so much about food and that whole business, which is fun.
Did I just make this up, or were you a roadie on Britney Spears back in the day, back in the early 2000s or late 90s, or one of the
no, I did a bunch of, because I used to work in concert lighting. So NSYNC, I worked with them. Who else? Dixie Chicks.
Oh yeah.
I guess they're just what the chicks
Now
now,
the chicks,
but
yep.
they were. Yeah, because I remember actually I was and these are doing the big arena shows, and I was doing lighting for that, and I definitely. There was one time I was carrying around a big, and they used to call these intelligent lights, lights that sort of swing around and you can program, and I was carrying one that was really heavy. The Dixie Chicks were talking to someone and they're right in my way. And I was just like, can you please move? And they were nice about it. I probably should have just gone around. Yeah, so I've done a bunch of those big arena shows. It's different world. For a long time, I thought that was what I was going to be, what my career path was going to be. But I'm glad I'm not a roadie, and those are really long hours and lousy pay. I mean, the only time you get to sleep is actually during the show. So I can't tell you how many big arenas, because I would do the setup on the strike, and so many of these shows, I'd be on the catwalk, on top of a pile of cables or something, trying to sleep, during a concert, which does not work. But it's I've been working straight for 15 hours, and now it's going to be, a 4-hour show, and then it's going to be another 15 hours of, strike. So I got to take whatever few minutes I can get.
And this when you were in your early 20s? You're in your early 20s doing this?
Early 20s, yeah. And I was working around New York and part of a production company that did a lot of TV jobs. So I'd be going around to a lot of the big arenas in DC and New York, Philly, and working those basically the TV concerts. The company I was working for would do work primarily for HBO and a lot of those kind of related shows.
Very cool.
And from that, you went to BU?
So yeah, and then then that was a case where I never thought I was going to be working in higher ed. A job came up. I got a call from someone there I knew, and he's like, "Hey, could you come in? Could you do this?" And I was like, "Well, all right, I need work, and I'm gonna do this for 1 year. That's it, 1 year. I am not going to be there for a long time." I do not want to be one of those people that spends all their life in higher ed.
And here you are.
And that was 21 years ago or so.
Wow.
Yeah, that was. But the nice thing about actually working in this is that you actually get to work with a lot of really new stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What we're working with is always changing, and there's money to do it. And there's so many companies like Blackmagic. I was talking to them, and they had bought a company that made video switchers, a company called Ecolab, and they were based right in Newton. And Blackmagic bought the company really only for the intellectual property, fired essentially the entire staff, saved one person, and we had some of these switchers, some of these Ecolab switchers. And so I was trying to call them and saying, like, I need parts. I need to make this work. And I remember this pretty vividly. And this is before the whole ATEM. This is before Blackmagic was sort of as known. And the guy goes, "Well, you're actually your education. That's what we want to target. Could we send you an early pre-production unit? Can we get some feedback?" And I remember I kind of redid the whole studio around all this ATEM stuff. And again, this is something where I feel like a lot of people know of this today. Anyone who, because it's so common in podcasting and small productions and big productions. But we got the first box, and I was talking to them because they were in Australia. So I would come in really early in the morning at like 4 a.m. And then one of their engineers would be staying up really late at night. And we'd be sort of going over and then troubleshooting bugs in the software. Every day there'd be another firmware update where they'd fix something. And that was sort of that's how I got into doing Blackmagic stuff.
Which helped us tremendously because, Blackmagic is, they're a very unique company. What they did was they would look at a product that was on the market that was expensive, and they would figure out what the essence of that product was. And they'd basically deconstruct it and then make their own version of it that just had really what mattered without all the unnecessary bells and whistles, and sell it for a fraction of the cost. To the point where you couldn't believe how cheap it was. But the caveat was, if it breaks, don't even call us, because we're making these things so affordable. Just buy another one, which is kind of bizarre. But look at them now.
Yeah, I mean, and they're somewhat of a controversial company in the industry. I mean, everyone uses their stuff in one capacity or another, and a lot of people really don't like using their stuff because of it's really expensive. Certain things work really well, and then but it's not as stable as some of the things that are much more expensive. So it's that it's that trade-off. Do you buy two of their products because they're still 30% of the cost of their competitors, but knowing that probably one of these is gonna need some work later on. They've changed the industry dramatically. I mean, I think they're kind of like I always think of them as the Tesla of broadcast, where they came in and they kind of disrupted a bunch of long-standing companies. They approach things much more from a software point of view. That's another one of the sort of complaints sometimes that a lot of products designed by more software people who seem like software engineers. They bring in a lot of really cool features, but at the same time, they don't have the stability as some of the long-standing brands. So the best thing to do is just be really flexible, know what they're good at. You get certain of their products, you get things from other companies. I mean, overall, Blackmagic has been great for broadcast because they've made it just so much more accessible, and they really made everyone sort of step up their game in terms of innovation.
Yeah, we bought a lot of Black Magic. I have a lot of Black Magic equipment right around
Our
right
mixer,
now, all of which
our
Jake
switcher.
spec and bought.
Yeah.
And I went to my first NAB. Black Magic had like a little pavilion, and I didn't go for a few years, and I would be going with Jake. And then the next time I went out there, they had the biggest pavilion out there. They had exploded, and we loved Black Magic. So funny story about NAB. When I went out there with Jake, you know the story I'm going to tell.
I think we're going to tell the same story of walking the booths with Jake. Yeah.
Walking the booths with Jake.
It was like being at when we went to NAFM with Jerry Hyman, who was the head of Trimark. In the same way that they would see Jerry Hyman going and get scared, when Jake would go up to the booth and start pestering with questions, it was, oh no. Because he knew their product better than they did.
Well, sometimes it was just the one succinct question. These guys, this is the biggest sales event for them for the year. And they have huge pavilions. It's expensive to be there. And, these guys can set up their entire year with clients if they do it right. And of course, technologically, these products are changing rapidly. And so they're putting products out there that maybe they shouldn't really be putting out, but they certainly shouldn't be representing that it does certain things. But Jake would know this. So we'd go up to a booth. They'd know him. How are you? A little bit of small talk. And then Jake would just ask that one question. So tell me, have you guys solved the problem with the whatever? And it was like you would hit the guy in the head with a hammer. And he would just look with those glazed eyes and say, well, we're working on it, and we've had some advances. And mid-sentence, Jake would say, okay, great. I'll stay in touch with you, and we'll be off to the next booth. And he'd just leave the guy flat. And then the guy's looking around to see if anyone saw it, because he just unmasked this guy who was a salesman. And that happened on several occasions in the different booths. And it would just be that one question: are you doing this yet? Or you solved that yet? And, some of them were nicer about it than others, but I'm walking out of there just dying, watching these people melt in front of them. And, we had great times. What was the last one you've been to? You were there a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah, I mean, I go usually every year. Didn't go last year, went the year before that, and then, there was the one pandemic year that they didn't have it, so I skipped that. And that was basically probably been 10 times or so.
Wow.
And probably go again in April. It's a great show. It's great to meet colleagues and see.
It's the second biggest show in Vegas, other than the Consumer Electronics Show.
It's like CES, World of Concrete, NAB, I think are the top three.
Right. And then
one side's for consumers, the other is for the creators. So NAB is the creator side, and then the consumer side is different.
Jake was a big buyer for BU, so he was a good customer. And then, of course, you had one studio that had a fire, and Jake never tells the story. I love telling the story, but he saved a whole bunch of students' lives. He's a hero. They had plugged all their phones in a little power cord somewhere. Then they threw all their jackets and coats on top of it, forgot about it, heated up, and poof, this thing ignites. And
I would say they never officially came up with with what happened.
Really, they never. That was.
Yeah, I mean, a power strip is probably the culprit. I mean, we know it was it was electronic. It certainly wasn't. They never said anyone did anything that that they shouldn't have done. I mean, it really was sort of a freak thing.
Well, it burned half the floor in this building, and Jake got all the students out. He was the adult in the room and took care of everyone. Saved all their lives. How many? Like a whole. I can't even count how many kids.
Yeah, I mean, it was mostly, a little backstory. I mean, it was a small electrical fire. There's a lot of smoke. I don't think anyone was really ever in danger. It's sort of funny because a bunch of students were in. This is a radio station. This is the old WBUR studios. So for those that remember Car Talk, this is where they kind of got their start. But very well made studios, very isolated. Basically, I mean, it was not like fire and flames, cinematic type stuff. I mean, this was one room really filled up with smoke. And the students were in our studio. Yeah, I mean, and the students were in the studio that was so sealed off and had dedicated ventilation because, for acoustic reasons. And they didn't even realize that, anything was happening outside of that. And then someone, went to the door and then realized, okay, that, there's smoke out here. And so they ran out. And then I didn't know this. And so I was trying to run. Once I realized, the alarms go off, I was trying to run in there, worried that they were in the studio. I didn't realize how many people had left. But it was funny because we go back in, the fire department comes and all the restoration, and in that studio that they were in, was pristine. I mean, there wasn't any dust on it. It was perfect. You would never know anything happened. So outside there's lots of smoke and the remnants of, again, there was not like huge flames, but a lot of smoke. In the studio itself, where the students were, was completely fine. I mean, actually, had the students known that they could have just stayed there, they could have been there, kept doing their show, that the power never went out, so they could have kept going, and all that would have happened around them. But that's the mark of a good studio right there.
Well, look, my story is way better. So you were Superman, and you saved all of their lives. That's the narrative. The fire department tore this place apart. The whole place had to be gutted.
The recording of the show.
That's right.
So other than being a tech and a hardware and broadcast ops guru, the first thing that comes to mind with Jake is the cycling, which we haven't really touched on, but we were not exaggerating when we said 600 miles is like a weekend ride for you. Yeah. So I can never pronounce the name of it. It starts with an R. What's the name of the cycling that you do?
It's a sport called randonneuring.
Okay. And it's a non-competitive sport, right?
Yeah, I mean, and that's why I love it. And this is a sport that goes back, 100 years, early 1900s. Started in France. There were randonneuring groups in every country. It's definitely a niche form of cycling. You do rides called brevets, which is French for, it roughly translates to short tour. So if you think about doing a long cycling tour that might be a couple hundred miles, and a cyclotourist, the people you see on the road sometimes, and they got all the big bags and the sleeping bags and the tent and all that, and they're riding, and maybe they're going to do 50 or 70 miles in a day. And they'll do that over the course of a week or, months. Brevets are essentially doing the same route, but without all the gear, without stopping. You're just going to go for a couple hundred miles. All the distances are in kilometers, so 300, 400, 600, 1,200 kilometers.
Right.
And you do that just in one sitting. When you can, it's timed but not competitive. So no one's listed by who's the first person to come in. There are maximum time limits, so you can't just do this over the course of a week. You are limited. You have to keep moving more or less. But there's such a feeling of camaraderie. That's why I really love these. I don't like any of the competitive cycling, but everyone is trying to just finish. And everyone's having a good time, and everyone loves cycling. So you're on the road with a bunch of other people, and you can be with people who are extremely strong, people who otherwise race. You may only see them at the start, but everyone is just so friendly. Everyone's really out to help one another. And so I've been doing that since 2006. And I'm now an organizer, and I've run a lot of rides out of Boston, and I've been involved.
You got a community award a few years ago from the organization. You'll never bring this up of yourself, but yes, you are a renowned.
Randonneuring. Yeah.
And how many states have you been in? How many states have you done? You've done this all over the country, right?
Yeah. I mean, when you really start spending a lot of time with this, I mean, you do the rides locally, and then you kind of get the bug, and you want to go to other places. And I, can't say enough good things about it. It's so much fun because the rules of the sport are the same. They're kind of run a little differently in different parts of the country, but overall the rules are the same. And so you can go to someplace, you could go to Arizona or Texas or California or Iowa, anywhere, and meet up with these groups that run these, and you'll do a ride, and the ride may only have 5 or 10 people on it, but you immediately have that connection because you're all seasoned cyclists, you're all in the same event, but again, the rules are basically the same. So it's great. It's like having friends everywhere in the country. So that's kind of that's what I really like doing. And then everything else is just, day job stuff.
And how many bikes do you have? How many bikes hanging up do you have?
People ask all the time, and there's not really a good answer because, what's a bike? I mean, is it frame? Is it completely,
a bike?
Is it something that I can hop on and ride right now? Is it still a bike if I might need to spend, an hour, put some wheels on or something? I know we probably have 15 bikes, I'd say, kind of that are assembled and more or less ready to ride now.
I counted 20 one time when I pulled up to your house and looked through the glass.
That's possible. Not all of them get ridden a whole lot. So that's
and you have specialty bikes. You have the bike that folds, right?
Yeah, that's a bunch of folding bikes, bunch of folding and separable bikes, and I don't use folding. I would use folding bikes to come down to Kingston a lot because you can put them onto to a train. There's folding bikes, which is one bike that folds up, and then there are separable bikes, and the separable bikes are the ones that have a piece that separates, and those can go into a special bag that is under the airline size limits, and those are the ones that you fly. So those, when built, they look like a normal full size bike, and they are a normal full size bike, but they do come apart in 2 or 3 places. So I have a few of those as well.
And now, were you already doing this when you met Emily, or that's how? So your partner Emily is also into this sport. She's actually has records, national records.
Yeah. I mean, she's far more. She's stronger and better at doing all these than I am.
And she didn't get you, and you were already doing it when you guys met.
We both sort of got into doing the long distance stuff together. She was a racer and she'd also done other rides. Again, randonoring it's a very niche sport. Nowadays, there's a lot of information on the web that didn't used to be. And Emily, this is before I met her, she was living in Somerville, right side of Boston. She would occasionally do these rides where, a common that's sort of like a big pinnacle capstone type ride that people sometimes do is they ride from Boston to Provincetown, the end of the Cape. And that's about 125 miles from Boston. And so she would do that, but then differently from most people, she would then turn around and ride back. So that was sort of her
like Forrest Gump. When you hit one coast, you just turn around.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. So that was sort of Emily's, and Emily would do other kind of long distance. Emily loves to ride, and she doesn't even have a driver's license. So in that time that I'm worrying about randonoring, Emily's doing really well. She ended up winning her category, was qualified for Race Across America, which is a really big long endurance ride. And here's like a sports. We're doing a sports podcast. This is the story you go. So we're riding, and there's not a lot of people in this category. There's another person riding a fixed gear, and it's in the middle of the night, and the person was ahead of Emily.
Through the night, you just keep
riding.
I mean,
you don't stop. I mean, you just keep riding. I mean, you can take a nap at the side of the road if you want, but the clock never stops ticking. It's a race, so.
Well, she's got to stop to go to the bathroom at some point.
Yeah, and to get a snack or something. So it's not like she doesn't get off the bike, but you're not.
You just got to turn and pee.
Long type stuff.
Yeah.
So we get to the so we're riding, and then up in the distance, this is the desert out there. So you see a long way ahead of you, and we see the light from another rider that we know is someone who's ahead of her. And we get closer and closer and closer. And then in the support vehicle, you actually have to figure out how do you navigate this, because you don't want to. You need to be behind your rider, but when the two riders are basically neck and neck, you have to figure out, you don't want to. You're not going to pass the other person's car until you're further away. And so we're not side by side with the other support vehicle. We're very close because we can see them. And Emily and this other rider are now riding more or less neck and neck. And this is a guy, definitely much more experienced, been doing this for a long time, longer than Emily. And Emily's having a great time. And Emily's like, hi, how you doing? It's something... and in this guy's defense, he's been riding now for probably 30 hours, a long time. And I think the idea of having a young woman pass him, he snapped. and he puts his head down and he goes balls to the wall as hard and as fast as he can. And he shoots off. And And, he's just sprinting. He's giving every, and so, okay, so his support vehicle passes and kind of, goes up. And he can sustain this for, I don't know, 5 minutes, 10 minutes.
Right. And he's
We
done.
can see him getting further. And finally, he just explodes. And, he's almost falls over. And,
She blows
he has
past him.
to stop. His support people sort of run out to go and help him. And Emily just, keeps riding and waves, we'll have a good ride. And she ended up finishing probably 2 hours ahead of him.
Wow.
But it was definitely one of those classic sports moments where,
The tortoise and the hare.
Yeah.
He was never seen from again.
Yeah.
And Emily being a good support. I mean, when we finished this, I was completely tired. It's actually it's a lot of work being a support vehicle. You can't sleep either. And so I was so ready to be done and just, I'm like, please, let's just go to the hotel and I need to go to sleep. And Emily's like, no, I want to wait here. I want to see the guy come in. I want to congratulate him. Not sure if he wanted to see her, but
yeah, it's the last thing he wants to.
But she was really good. I think she would. And they were, and he was friendly. I mean, there wasn't bad blood, but it's definitely one of those famous sports moments there. Don't
it's an ESPN highlight.
Cool when you're,
it's on. Pardon the interruption.
And is she still doing dill pickle?
Yep. Yeah. So and it sort of turned into a business for her because we would. Emily makes bags. She does everything. Amazing person. But there are these group rides called fleshes, and they're really fun. And you have a small group of people, and you ride as a team for 360 kilometers, about 225 miles. You ride in exactly 24 hours. So you start at 7 a.m. and you ride overnight, and you finish at 7 a.m. the next day. And so the first time she done one of these, she made bags for me and for her. These bags that go underneath the saddle bags. And we get to the finish, and there's a bunch of other teams. There's probably, 25 or 30 people. And everyone's gathering around and looking at her bike and going wow, that bag looks so nice. That bag looks awesome. And I was like, Emily, maybe you want to make these. That's what, a lot of people were asking. They're like, oh, can you make me one? And she's mostly a professional musician. The bag thing is sort of, her day job. And that kind of turned into what she started doing. First it was just kind of a side project, and now that's her primary business outside of music is making very custom specialty bags for bikes and for instruments. She's a recorder and transfers flute, and so she also makes lots of instrument cases.
And the instruments she plays are not just regular instruments. These are antiques, or what's the proper word? These are all Renaissance or
it's in the genre of, or the grouping of early music, which is a pretty broad time period. And so she plays historically informed music, performance. So basically playing instruments that are representative of what was found primarily in the Baroque and Renaissance period. And these are recorders, and that's sort of the time period that recorders were primarily used. And so the instruments she plays, not all of them are replicas of historic instruments. Some of them are new, but they all work the same way. The Bach and his various sons are the ones that principally, a lot of people wrote music, but if people have heard recorder music outside of elementary school, it's probably a Bach cantata.
So Jake, you can say no because we can cut this. But I want to embarrass you. I think it's a beautiful story of how did you actually get connected with Emily? Would you tell that story to us?
Usually when people ask, I just say cycling.
Yeah, but I know the truth.
But we know that's not true.
Yeah,
I think this is I think this would help people find their true love.
No one will be able to do it again in the future. So this is, our method is gone. The truth is that years ago, there was a little site called Craigslist. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
I found many roommates on Craigslist. I know that sounds scary to people, but most of my roommates have come through Craigslist.
Craigslist is an amazing site. I mean, and so they had personals,
Mhm.
and I was looking to meet someone, and I posted an ad, and I actually got a bunch of responses from my first ad, and talked to a bunch of people online. Didn't get to the point of seeing anyone. A lot of college students at Wellesley, for whatever reason. I was also, I'm 22 or so this is not, I'm not long out of college myself. It would make sense that there would be people in kind of a similar age group. And the thing I like about Craigslist, and again, I feel like I'm really dating myself or my way of
It's
thinking
way
about things.
before eHarmony and
It's before,
Match and all
and
that
some of,
stuff.
right. And I think some of those sites were around and people were using them. But the beauty of Craigslist, and it's a shame that it's gone, is that it's completely freeform. So it's not like one of these new dating sites where it's very templated and you put in your interest and then it tries to do the matching. And,
Right.
when you select people and, it's very, and for a lot of people, that's what they want. I really like Craigslist because I did not want to go through that whole template. It was ties back into like how I design studios, where I don't want to use the standard formulaic way of building things, even if that's what most people do.
You're a DIY punk rocker at heart.
For better or worse. That's the and so I just, again, it's I posted an ad, got some people I was talking to, didn't really go anywhere. And I think I was more bitter than anything else. And so I sort of posted
That's what I
this
love about it. It's so honest. It's so brutally honest.
Yeah, I mean, it was like, and I basically posted, and put a post up, and I described myself, and I said, let's not go into the whole photos, and like, I only need to see you, like, here are my interests, here's who I am. If it sounds like I'm someone who you would be interested in, let me know. We'll go from there. I don't care how tall you are. If all you care about is looking for someone who's, 6'5", then it's not going to work. And then I heard nothing, unsurprisingly. I'm sure 99% of people out there thought, who is this, like, bitter guy? And, and in Craigslist time, like really anything, classifieds. Usually if you don't hear anything within the first 24 hours, it's gone. I mean, no one's digging through things. But I did mention bikes, and how I like to bike. And I got like a week later, I get a message from Emily saying like, hey, I saw your profile, or saw your post. It's not a profile, it's just a post. You sound kind of interesting. And we exchanged emails. We met up for coffee, and then, kind of went from there. And that was a very long time ago.
So the message is just be honest and let the forces of the internet connect you with whoever it may connect you with.
I mean, that's the way I see it. I mean, Emily and I are probably not the right models. I've always wanted to, at some point, Emily and I joke about this. We want to, we need to like sit down and do like a little handwritten letter to Craig Newmark and say like, thank you for Craigslist.
Will you guys be on my reality show? I want to have you guys. You can be like the Somerville couple. Are you in where you're in? Yeah, in Somerville, right? Still or no?
No, we're in Medford now.
Medford, right? Yeah.
Yeah, next in Somerville.
Right. So yeah, we're gonna do a reality show of you two, Medford Love, about your renovations in the house. Don't you have a giant snake?
It's not a giant snake. Emily has a it's a ball python. They are very common.
When I hear python, I think big snake.
Yeah, I mean it's about 5 feet. It's about 5 feet long. Probably about. Yeah, sorry, Kathy.
Yeah, Kathy's not sleeping tonight. She dislikes nothing more than snakes.
Yeah,
now I'm gonna have nightmares.
Probably about an inch in diameter instead of 6 point. Great guy named Tusik. I mean, ball pythons are the golden retrievers of snakes.
Lovely way to describe it.
I mean, they're really laid back. They're really friendly. They make great pets. They don't eat a scaredy snake. You couldn't. Unless you happen to be a mouse or a rat, you really have nothing to fear from him. And even that, I think he'd be scared of most critters of that size. So yeah, but here's the story. I shouldn't say this.
Now you
Probably.
Definitely should tell it. That's
no, because I'm gonna get in trouble. Because I don't, I don't want to. There could be some PETA people watching. I don't want to.
That's true. There goes our PETA sponsorship. So the last thing I want to. So we've talked about. So you've built for us now 4 studios. 2 in Boston. There's the one in PA. There's the one in Kingston. We did the live shows. We did the pilot. But then the Foodie was our foray into actual linear television. But to me, it's kind of a blur because it launched during like the March of COVID, I think, is when we premiered. So that kind of got lost in that. And it was around the time we closed 2 different restaurants. But what is your memory of the television episodes we did for NECN, where we went up to we did oyster fishing, we went lobster fishing, we went to a beef farm, we went to Flower Bakery with Joanne Chang, Fenway Park. We had the GoPros on the lobster fishing. So when you think of our last time filming together was probably the Foodie. What are your memories of that?
I just a fun project, and that was actually much more. I feel like in a lot of ways that was much more traditional TV. That is. We were shooting that the way that that a documentary or to a lesser extent reality TV would be shot. It's not a reality. That's a very loaded word. But it's more of like a documentary. So we're on a lobster boat, and here we are, at sea, going up and down.
We lost one of your GoPros.
You did.
I went overboard.
I'll take the blame for that. I probably didn't attach it as securely as I should have to the top of the mast of the
boom
boat.
or mast. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was a really hard shoot too, because those lobstermen they were good on camera, but they were not waiting around for anything. That was like we were out here to.
I think salty would be a good way to describe them. They were some salty Mainers,
and very, very much so. And so being on that boat, going up and down, and trying to get good audio and trying to get good shots, and it's a teeny little space. So how do you frame this? And we didn't have a chance to go in there. Normally I think we would, you'd want to put more smaller cameras hidden where the people were going to be speaking, because there's just not much room on one of these boats. So we didn't have to do that. We didn't have the ability to do that. We had such a short amount of time. So that was a difficult shoot. And that was sort of much more traditional videography, shooting. Fun. Those episodes were all a lot of work. There was a lot more editing than some of the other projects. I think all really interesting. It was really fun going to a bunch of those places that I hadn't been to. I think going to Flower was probably my favorite of all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Going to the Cafarelli kitchen and
the bread quarters.
Yeah. And they ran a really nice operation. Every single shot looked really good. Everything really lended itself well to the show, to the Foodie. I think it lended it well to what Liz was interested in. And that was a really fun shoot. And then the lobster pot up in Maine, that was fun too. So
the cows. I gotta say, speaking of PETA, no personality in an Angus beef cow. They are just 1,000 pounds of smell. They were tough on camera. They did not cooperate. They wouldn't move.
That was that was a shot. It was funny because I'm up there. It was. I hadn't spent a lot of time in that part of New York, and I just remember thinking, like, it is, cows aside, it is gorgeous here.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I want to say
I need some more
New
time
York?
riding up around there.
Yeah.
I have since been back there, because usually I kind of stop around the Berkshires, and this is right over the mountain range into New York.
Mm-hmm. Very nice.
Here's something though that will really make Kathy unhappy. Sorry, Kathy. Around that area, so not far from where that farm was. This is, I don't know, I guess last spring. Emily and I were doing a ride, and it's, this is a 125-mile ride, and we kind of go over the mountain range, over the Berkshires. We started in Great Barrington, and it's a really fun ride. And we're on this long bike path. It's the Harlem River bike path, which is new, and we don't usually do a lot of rides on bike paths, but this is a really nice path. And we're riding, and we're talking and having a good time. And this is in the morning, it's 10 a.m. or so, and we see something go across the path, and we both sort of perk up because we're looking for animals. And at first I thought, what was that? Was that, like a bit of a turtle? And Emily immediately noticed the snake. Emily's really into snakes. And so we stop, we turn, put the bikes down, we look around, and there on the side of the path is a big, gorgeous specimen of a timber rattlesnake.
Oh, yeah.
That timber rattlesnakes are really cool snakes. They're the only venomous snake that we have in New England.
So you got closer.
And so, and it's, and they are, they're endangered in Massachusetts, very, very small communities in Massachusetts. They're threatened in New York. So, they're really only in a couple different spots. So
we have them here in New Jersey.
Yeah. And actually there's more of them the further you go south. But I'd never see one in person. It was definitely like a bucket list thing. And when we're there, we're taking tons of photos, and the snake doesn't care. I mean, they're not, if you don't harass them, if you don't try to like poke at them or pick them up, you don't really have too much to worry about. People get bitten usually either when they're trying to harass them or when they surprise the snake. But in this case, we see the snake, so we're not going to surprise it. And Emily's bike, Emily is beside herself. She loves snakes. And her bike is laying across the path. There's no one up there. Thankfully it's, path is very quiet. And the snake kind of goes to one side of the path. We think, okay, it's going to go in the reeds. It's done. And then it turns around. It slithers back. It actually slithers over Emily's bike through the rear wheel. We start getting nervous. It's like, don't get stuck in there, or I can be able to get you out. And
you didn't put it in one of her in the bag, the special made bags, and bring it home.
And then we're about to leave, and the snake is like not completely across the path. We don't want to get run over. We don't want somebody to be surprised. Someone's using her bike wheel and trying to just nudge it just gently, being like, could you?
How long was the snake?
So you brought it home, and here it is.
How long was the snake?
Well, I mean, it's bigger than the snake. I don't know, 6 feet or so.
Yeah.
Oh, Captain,
they're pretty, but it has, it has the rattle. So, and you can tell its age by, not exactly, but I think it was a 4 or 5 year old snake, because the rattle.
How long the rattle is?
Because every time every time the snake sheds, it gets another segment on its rattle.
Very cool.
So that's. Yeah.
So all these years, Jake never owned a car. He would rent them whenever we would go out on shoots, zip cars or vans.
Mm-hmm.
And, we now live down in New Jersey, but we were in south of Boston for all these years when we were doing this production. I talked to Jake a couple of months ago, and he said, guess what? And I don't know, you bought another house? And he goes, no, more important than that, I bought a car. I was like, you bought a car? I bought a van. Now,
it's because every night you'd be like, Jake, one day you're gonna get a car,
and you would swear
that you would never, not doing it.
I mean, the projects that he did at his house, and they would figure out a way to get, like, they have a bike called a cargo bike. There's a photo of them, and they have like sheets of plywood on this bike, and then driving through Medford Center, back up to the house, 2x4s up to the house. They did the whole job on this bike. Like, what? Why don't you get a car?
That's crazy.
No.
Yeah, well, we're lucky. There's a great plywood store, Boulder Plywood in Medford. Yeah, see if they can be a sponsor. And nice people, and so not that long of a ride, and they have hardwood, so we get a lot of.
I'm not joking. He had sheets of plywood on this bike.
And honestly, Emily does. Emily is more. I won't get to the point where I'm like, damn it, I'm just gonna rent a car and get this stuff. Emily will tough it out and get the bring it home.
Well, she does. She's never had a driver's license.
Yeah,
right?
she doesn't have a driver's license. never want one. And it was just a matter of, you can only go, unless you want to spend 5 hours riding to someplace you really want to start the ride from. There's only so far you can go, and you can take the train places. So we were renting cars every weekend to go on rides and go in other places. For years, we did this for a really long time.
And then you did the
finally
math.
Like, enough of this. Like, let's just buy a, so we bought a used Ford Transit Connect. Great little car, cheapest one I could find.
Michael knows about those. Michael knows
you
about
just
those.
we roll the bikes right into the back, bunch of car them down, drive to someplace. Can do a ride. Same thing. And the best part about it, it's the one with the raised roof, so it's really easy to change in the back of it.
Yep.
That's sort of my favorite part. You
Yep.
put the bike there, take the bike out, change into your clothes,
Yep.
do the ride, come back, immediately change back into street clothes and keep going.
So, Michael, that's a
speaking
podcast. That's an
speaking of
episode
van.
right there to talk about your van. We're not going to do that.
The height
tonight.
of my adult hubris was when I said I could convert a van by myself, and very quickly needed to enlist Jim to build it, but then Jake to do the wiring.
Right.
And you helped. We had a Ford Transit 250 high roof extended that I converted in 2021-ish. Fully off grid. I had solar, I had a 60-gallon water tank, inside
Shower.
like a cabin. Jim did all the shower in there.
Great
But
kitchen.
eventually
Great
I
kitchen.
hit the wall on the wiring and the lights, and had to call Jake in, and he to the rescue.
Yep.
Figured out how to get this thing fully powered.
Yep.
Yeah.
But yeah,
that was
whole...
another fun project. Had not done that before. Done a lot of wiring, but usually it's it's usually low voltage video, not it's still low voltage, but
Well, I'm glad you have a
For-
fond
for
memory of
them,
it,
no.
because we're never doing another. Ever. So
And just to illustrate to people how Jake is truly about the love of the game, and that his life is cycling, everything else is second, is that like once a year, Kathy would have to remind him to cash his paychecks, because he would just, all his paychecks, I think we put them in a drawer because you never cash them. And we have to remind you, hey, we're trying to close the books this year, and you have 26 paychecks for the year that haven't been cashed
Yeah.
yet.
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
he thought he was
Oh,
working
yeah,
all that
so-
time. He thought he was just working for food. He didn't even know.
Pizza and,
Yeah.
and espresso. Yeah, it was good espresso,
I mean, I had a lot of espressos.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's great working with you. I will say, I think if you ever said, like, you know what, no more food, like, that's
It's over.
cutting you
That's
off.
it. That's a deal
I
breaker.
think our only failure is we never got you to come off of well done steaks.
Yeah.
I don't think we ever got you even towards
Yeah.
medium.
Hockey
I
puck
know, well,
steak. But
I mean, at this
every time I see a caper, I think of you.
Right.
Every
I
salad.
buy the
extra
giant
capers.
bottles from Costco of capers right there.
Yeah. Yeah. That, and you have a great taste in our crafted beers, because you sampled so many of them on all these bike rides, and spicy
There was a
infused vodkas.
strawberry liqueur you introduced me once. It was like a strawberry beer or something that we had. That you,
And
that,
there's all the what's the name of it? Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of the all
It
those
was German,
Belgian
Yeah,
sours.
Belgian, yeah.
They use so many fruit ones there. They're great.
So I want to take a minute and talk about the Emmys a little bit, because we've talked about them in the 2 prior episodes, and I think this sort of puts a bow on it, because the Emmys became a big part of our life, and we couldn't have done them. We couldn't have done them without you. We didn't even know how to do them, how to get involved, and you sort of.
we didn't know how to export a file. Let alone.
Michael, I wasn't a Mac guy. When I met Jake, he got me.
Yeah.
I was a
And Jake's
PC
not a Mac guy, but
put me on Mac. I think of all the millions of calls I would call you when I got in trouble editing or whatever, and I'd interrupt you during the course of a day, and you always had patience and you'd walk me through it. And there were always these dumb, stupid mistakes because of my ignorance. And I do it now, like when I'm in Avid now, and I'm doing things, and I actually will say I can't believe some of the things that I called Jake about, hundreds, thousands of times. But anyway, I digress. So as we're growing and our production quality is getting better because of you, and we finally start submitting for every consideration, and the whole Comcast thing was happening, we were a bit of on a roll, and I'll never forget when we finally were encouraged to submit for the Emmys, and you said, well, it's, first of all, you're never going to get an Emmy. So you'd be lucky to get nominated, which is so true. And that came back many, many times. I heard that ringing in my ears. Some of those years when we lost, and had 8 nominations and we'd walk out with nothing. And I would be thinking, hearing Jake in the back, just be happy with the nomination. But when we were doing this and you sort of coached us through it and you showed, the applications alone are just a ton of work and they have all kinds of rules and you knew all the rules. And we would put these in, and then each year we were getting nominated, sometimes a lot of nominations, and we would go to these Emmy Awards and they were wild. The years that we won, we were like school kids jumping up and down, up on the stage, me giving acceptance speeches that were
alcohol
way too long.
contributed to that.
Yeah, the alcohol definitely
Back when you used to drink.
Yeah. So you have 2 or 3 Emmys, Jake?
3.
You have 3, right? And you have them in your office at BU?
I'm in my office.
And the students come in and they see those. I've never seen an Emmy before, right?
Yeah.
And do you just hang your hat on them, or do you have them prominently displayed?
I mean, they're directly across from the door, but
it's a doorstop. You use it as a doorstop.
It's a
I mean, it's it's the old expression. You're always good as your last project. So I know I'm not. I'm really proud of what I've done. It's been great working. Done a lot of good things with them, but you're always looking forward as to whoever the next project's going to be.
Well, now it's the podcast. So what do we win for? What are the awards for great podcasts, Michael? Who oversees this
or something? Yeah, we're not getting anything.
I think it's viewers. I think the award is a lot of viewers.
Yeah, it's probably right.
Good job.
Well, we're not done yet, Jake. I just turned 65, so we got a long way to go, and it's just another turn in the road, and that's what these things are all about. But
well, I love working. I love working with you, Michael, with Kathy. Yeah, it's so much fun. Working in food is really fun in general. I never would have thought that going on way back when I first got started. I didn't think that the whole culinary side would be interesting, but it really is, and it's enjoyable. Yeah, so I'm up for whatever you come up with.
Yeah, we might
we
do
got
some
some
right
ideas.
here. We have a great kitchen here at this location. The one thing we didn't talk about was the studios that we were building were functioning kitchens. They weren't sets. So we would have real cooking, real noxious odors. We'd have to, make sure we had real ventilation,
smoke,
which
water,
caused sound
everything.
problems. So we had to make sure we were ventilating, but we weren't, ruining the shoot. So sometimes we'd have to turn the fan off, cook, get the shot, and then turn the fan on so we could exhaust the room so you could see each other again. And then there were cameras that we would put right over the cooktops, and, they'd start to get greasy. And you'd have to take the cameras down and clean them off and, clean the lenses and all kinds of different things, because we were actually running a real kitchen. It was a real cooking show. People were dining, they were drinking, and we were recording it all and then turning them into these television assets. And that was, I think, of all the different things we did, that added component, which complicated things so much, really was what had to keep you thinking. And, how many times did we have a problem in the studio and we just walk out, go right in the kitchen, grab what we needed out of the cooler, come back and set it up. And you'd say to me, Jim, if I were doing this out on a location shoot, that would have just shut down. We'd have been down for an hour while someone ran down the street. And, with us, just go in the kitchen, cut another one, bring it back out. And that was this added benefit of these shoots that were done inside a studio that was inside of a restaurant. And, we learned over the years just how special that was, to the point where it is unique. We still have not bumped into anyone has ever said, oh yeah, we do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's completely unique. I mean, I feel like there is, there's a lot of cooking online. There's a lot of people who want to go and, think of themselves as next Martha Stewart, and, they're going to do a show, and they have a hot plate, and, they're cooking on a small burner. And even in a professional setting where they built somewhat of a studio, it's a TV studio first, and the kitchen part is just kind of tacked on.
Right.
and there's one burner that's being used at a time.
The propane
there's no
tank,
hood,
right.
and there's none of that. And the shot may look good because it's pretty narrow, but to be in a real functioning kitchen that has to pass all the certifications. I've always been nervous that one day I'm going to be walking by one of the poles for I wouldn't forget what it's called, but the special
the Ansel station, the Ansel heads.
The Ansel system,
right.
The foam.
And then we go off.
I've always sort of had this fear. I'm going to walk by.
Knock on wood. We've never set the Ansel off. That would have been a disaster.
That would shut down the shoot.
It.
Right.
And then there's it's not like there's just production people there. I mean, there's a room.
People, right? People,
right. 25, 30 people.
Yeah, we never had a disaster like that.
Glass in the dining room.
Right, exactly. Yeah, fortunately we've never had.
That's a really fun, and that's a fun and challenging aspect. I think that's really not and something that other people wouldn't do. I mean, there's no other studio that's focused around food where you really are going to have people from the outside who are enjoying the food and they are there for the food.
And then
they're there for the food and for the instruction, but they're not there for TV. So if you have a studio that's in HGBH or Disney or something, I mean, it's the TV part is the first and foremost. Whereas everything you've done has been, it's the host and the food, and we try to not get in their way of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you remember the blinking on-air sign that we used to have over the door? How many shoots did we have in the studio while the restaurant was functioning, and we'd forget to lock the door, and we'd be in the middle of filming, and people would come up, and we were used to that, and they were in the glass, and they'd wave, whatever, and then all of a sudden they'd open the door, just I'm walking in, hey, this is
hey, what are you guys doing in here?
Ruin the shoot, stop cooking, and you had to be nice to them. You didn't want to, make them angry. And you talk, answer their questions, and you just sort of shuffle them out and make sure you lock the door behind them and reset up the whole counter. Take another hour, style the whole thing, start all over again, and that happened more than our fair share of times. And but it was always a lot of fun, and none of which we would have ever been able to do without you, Jake. You were literally the backbone. I've said
you're the visionary.
By the way, I don't know if Michael mentioned to you, but we're going to move to Premiere. We're not going to do
Da Vinci or Premiere. We still have not decided.
Well, I thought you did it today. I thought you actually did the subscription today. No,
Adobe, you're welcome to give us a
feel like
subscription.
for the viewers at home, because we mentioned Final Cut. So when you first came came into the project, it was Final Cut, and we did a couple things with Final Cut, and that's when you said, is this really what the right thing to doing? And I'm an Avid person. That's kind of my background. And so we switched over to Avid, and I was a little apprehensive because a lot of people, Avid is a much more difficult program to work with.
Right.
And really, to your credit, you become an Avid editor, and that's great. Nowadays, Avid is still used, but there are a lot more companies, and there's so many things you can do very quickly with the Adobe suite and with Resolve.
Fewer steps.
I think it's worth.
Yeah.
Kind of making those transitions. It's not sort of the binary that it used to be.
If I don't stop Jim, he will restart, and we'll go for another hour. But yeah, Jake, we would still be doing the Caesar Salad, Hill Caesar, Friday night shows only, and no one would have ever heard of it if it wasn't for you supercharging all the tech, all the cameras, all the monitors, all the mics.
The friendship.
We literally could not figure out how to export a file without for you. Yeah.
Well, it's a great project. It's great working with both of you. And Kathy's not here, but working with her too. This is fun. If it wasn't fun, I would have been, I would have hung my hat and moved on a long time ago. You're just such great people to work with, both in really good people, but then at the beginning, I mean, really good eye for being I feel like first and foremost, a good producer. You know what it takes. You know what you want. You know what's realistic. You know what a push that we can do. You don't compromise. I mean, you really want something to be good, and you're going to keep working on it. But being really reasonable. I mean, I think everyone who's worked in this business has worked with really difficult producers.
Yeah.
And either they don't know what they want, or they're just demanding. The worst is they don't know what they want, but they know they want something, so they just get really demanding.
Yeah.
And it's not the way.
Are you saying the entertainment industry is full of jerks and incompetent?
No.
People,
There's one or two. That's it.
I haven't run into that in LA yet, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, that wouldn't be in LA. No, not at all. It's the Boston thing at most.
Well, Jake,
Well, thank you so much for doing this, Jake. Really appreciate it.
Well, you're welcome. You're welcome.
A lot of fun.
And
We'll continue.
we will
we're
have
on
either
to
more podcasts.
Yep.
Yep. Sorry, Jake. But just today, this potential music venue we'll be working on that you'll be involved with. We just got that coming through
Awesome.
the pipeline.
We'll see. Yeah.
So,
Can't wait.
yeah, we will be building more, but no snakes if Kathy's going to be involved.
Yeah.
No
Right.
snakes.
Okay. Great to see you.
Likewise.
Say hello to Emily
right.
for us, and I'm sure
Will do.
I'll be talking to you shortly when I start editing this damn thing. And
Yeah, when I'll reach our first roadblock on this.
right.
You know, find me.
All right. Thanks, Jake.
All right.
Thanks,
Take
Michael.
care, everyone.
Thanks, Kathy, wherever you are, and we'll talk to you soon. Okay. All right. Thanks.
All right. That's a wrap.